Hey there, and welcome to a new episode of the Dietitian Success Podcast, the business and marketing podcast for registered dietitians. If you are new here, I am your host. I'm Krista Kolajesic, and I'm the founder of Dietitian Success Center. If you're completely new to Dietitian Success Center, then you'll definitely want to join our brand new free dietitian community. Just go to dietitiansuccesscenter.com and just join the free starter kit, and you'll get a bunch of awesome free resources, free client handouts, PES statement, cheat sheet, and then access to our amazing, super inviting, warm, magical dietitian community. We just started the free community actually at the end of January. We went live with the free community, and we've had over 1,500 dietitians join us in the last, I guess it's been 3 months, which has been really cool to see. And it's just a really warm, safe, inviting space. So make sure and join that. The other thing I wanted to mention too, as a part of the DSC membership, so once you're in, you'll learn a lot more about us and what we do. But if you're a current member and you're listening to this, you may not know this yet. But did you know that we are actually now offering CEUs as well, which is really cool. So if you're a part of our practitioner membership, you can actually get up to 20 CEUs a year, and maybe even a little bit more, because we've been able to get approved for some additional CEUs through some of our workshops. But we're basically going to be running, how we're going to do this is we're going to be running live workshops every quarter, and each live workshop has been approved for about 5 CEUs, which is amazing. So the idea here being that if you are a DSC member, you can meet all of your CEU requirements through just our membership. Now, if you are not a US dietitian, because obviously we have a lot of dietitians from Canada and all over the world, we all have professional development obligations. We all have to set learning goals in some capacity. And so these are open to all dietitians, regardless of where you are, and they can really align with those professional development goals that you have to set. So yeah, it's going to be really awesome. The topics that we're choosing are the intent there is for them to be applicable to dietitians in pretty much all area of practice. So we don't want them to be too niche, so they're only focused on specific dietitians in specific areas. But for example, last week we had our first session, and it was all about navigating disordered eating in the wild, because we know dietitians, regardless of whether you're working with individuals, with groups, or even just friends and family, having conversations with friends and family, disordered eating is coming up more and more. So that was a really awesome conversation. But anyway, so join the practitioner membership and you can get access to all of our content, our entire resource library, hundreds of client handouts, but then also these live CEU events too. So that's really exciting. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about today's episode of the Dietitian Success Podcast. So as of this year, 2025, I have started to live cast the podcast on Tuesdays. So live record in the DSC free community. And then we post the episode on Thursdays. If you are joining us live, it's a really awesome opportunity to be able to ask any questions. So please do feel free to post in the chat. Just keep yourself on mute and you can keep your camera off. But if you do have questions that come up as I'm going through the content, please post them in the chat and I can totally address those either as I'm going through the material or at the very end. Because sometimes, as I'm going through, I have my notes and sort of a rough outline for every podcast episode, but sometimes I feel like there's content that I'll be talking about, and then there will be a detail that I don't see because I'm too far detached from it, that somebody's like, oh no, but wait, can you go further on that? Or can you go deeper on that thing? Or can you tell me how you did that? And so this is a really great way for me to just be able to, have that back and forth a little bit and, have you ask those questions in real time, just so I can make this content even better every week. So today I am talking all about branding. And the preliminary title of this episode has been How to Refresh a Stale Brand. Now, depending on where I go with this, we may keep that title or we may change that title for the actual podcast episode release on Thursday. But I wanted to have a conversation about branding, whether you are someone who is new to business, maybe you're in the beginning stages, you're thinking about starting a business, or you're just in those early stages and you're thinking about brand and what that even means and what that even looks like. Or if you're someone that already has a business and things are, quote unquote, working, you're bringing money into your business, but you're sort of at this like perhaps junction point of wondering, should I refresh my brand? And at what point should I do that? When is the right time? Should I pay money for that? What does the process look like? And so on and so forth. And so that I want to talk about just our journey as a business within Dietitian Success Center, our branding journey, and what the evolution of that has looked like from beginner entrepreneur to more seasoned entrepreneur, and like what those points in time have been where I've made the decision to refresh the brand and what the impact of that has been. Because I think that's an important piece to talk about too, is like, what does that even mean? And why did you do it? And what was the after effect? So yeah, going to get into all of those details. But let's actually start by talking about a little bit of, or really defining branding. I think that's an important piece to talk about first, because often when people think about a brand, now, by the way, I absolutely am not a branding expert. I just speak from our experience of having gone through this journey and also working with people who are branding experts. So I can bring some of those learnings into this conversation too. But really how I understand branding is that a lot of times when you think of brand, and this is what I thought really when I first started Dietitian Success Center, or really when I first started in business, is, I thought brand equals colors, fonts, logo, images. I thought a lot about those tangible components of a brand, when in reality, a brand is those tangible components. That's one part of it for sure. But a brand is also what we call, or it also includes a component of like what I refer to as intangibles, which are like, and I heard a quote once and I love it. And it's just really stuck with me. It was like, a brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. Or like how you make people feel is also an intangible part of your brand. So it's really like an all-encompassing umbrella term for how do you show up in the world. And that can be either your own personal brand. So just depending on how you have your business set up, if your business is really focused around you being the brand, like you are the focal point. So let's say that, for me, one of my first businesses was doing freelancing and consulting. And so my business was called Krista Co. Wellness Consulting. And so I really clearly, by the name, I really was the brand. It was a personal brand that was really focused around me. And so for me, the important thing there was like, okay, how do I personally show up in the world? But now with Dietitian Success Center is its own living and breathing brand. I am not the face of that, of DSC. DSC is its own entity. And so then there's the thought of like, okay, so then how does DSC show up in the world? What does DSC look like? What colors, fonts, logo, templates, etc. does DSC do we use for DSC? And then also like, how does DSC make people feel? What do people say about DSC when DSC isn't in the room? And so we can think about brand in those two different ways, thinking about it. Is it your personal brand? Are you the face of it or are you not? And is it like a brand that stands alone? But we do have to think about those two different components, the tangibles, so the visual elements, and then also the intangibles. So how exactly do we think about those two different components? And maybe I'll sort of integrate this into our brand evolution story. So when I first started my business, back in, I'm trying to remember, maybe 2018, when it was Krista Co. Wellness Consulting, I really knew nothing about branding. And I didn't even really consider the intangibles. Okay, like how am I going to be showing up? What are those words that I want to be known for? I just really considered the visual elements of the brand. And so I actually really love the logo that I had created for Krista Co. Wellness Consulting. But I knew at the very beginning, okay, I want to create something that looks professional. And that was really all I knew or cared about. And so I thought, okay, well, I think at the time, Canva didn't have its logo generation tool. So now Canva has a really great feature where you can actually, you can choose from a bunch of logo templates and kind of create something that looks actually really good. But at the time, creating a professional logo, was pretty challenging to do unless you had access to like Adobe Photoshop or Adobe Illustrator. And so I was like, I don't know if I want to go about that whole process of trying to DIY it. I know I need something that looks pretty professional because with that business, I was approaching, brands like food brands or other wellness brands to do freelancing and consulting projects. And so I actually had my logo created on Fiverr. So Fiverr is a really great freelancing platform. I've used it a few times for different little ad hoc creative projects. But basically how it works, Fiverr or Upwork, is you essentially find freelancers who can do, again, just like one-off little creative projects for you. So I do not remember how much I spent on that website, on that first iteration of the logo. But it was probably around $100. So pretty cheap. But that was really version 1. And how I got inspiration for what I wanted is I literally just looked online. I looked at logos on Pinterest. And again, I had really no backbone in terms of like, what did I want my brand to stand for? What were the brand adjectives that I wanted to be known for, which I'll talk about in a minute. And so I just went onto Pinterest and I just looked up, I think, feminine logos, and I found some examples of things that I liked. And I literally just took those to Fiverr. I found anyone, like any random person who did logos that fit within my budget, and I got them to create something for me, which ended up working fine at the time. And so that was like a good first version that worked fine. And then version 2, so how the brand then evolved from there, is actually when Dietitian Success Center was launched. So the business changed. And so obviously there was a need to really rethink, okay, what is this brand going to be? What's it going to look like? What is it going to stand for? at the time, I learned enough about branding to know that, oh, okay, we need to consider the tangibles and the intangibles. So, how exactly do you think about the intangibles? What you want to be known for, how you want to show up in the world? Um, so, one really great exercise to do this, and it's actually super simple, and it's something that I actually, back when I worked in the corporate world, so I worked in food industry, for one of the world's largest food and beverage companies. And this is actually an exercise that would be done in those meetings when you are working with people to come up with a new brand, is you actually come up with a list of adjectives that you want the brand to be known for. And so you almost give it a bit of a personality. And so what you can do as a starting point is you can just Google brand adjectives list, or you could go to ChatGPT and get it to generate a huge list of adjectives for you. And then you pick ones. You pick some core adjectives, I would say 3 to 5, that you feel like really exemplify how you want your brand to show up. And what that does, and so some examples there are things like, do you want your brand to be silly, down to earth, fun, professional, relatable, brave, courageous, bold, curious? Those are all different examples that will show up in those lists. And why that's so important is because it almost gives you that foundation for what are you building everything else on. So for example, an example I always think about to show two very different brands would be a brand like Red Bull. Their adjectives are probably things like bold, courageous, out of the box, or like unconventional, right? Those are 3 words that come to mind when I think about a brand like Red Bull. And everything they do, from their brand colors to the tone that they use in their marketing messaging to, the events that they run to the products that they launch, it's all centered around those brand adjectives, right? It all comes back to those brand adjectives. They're not trying to be a gentle, calm, peaceful brand. That's not the intention behind Red Bull. Versus, let's think about a brand like Dove is kind of the opposite, right? If we're thinking about like Dove soaps and body care products, that's very different. That's very much more gentle, nurturing, caring, perhaps feminine, right? So those are 2 very different brands, but you can see how those adjectives kind of provide that foundation for how you build everything else. And so when I launched Dietitian Success Center, the question then came back to, okay, well then what do I want us to stand for? And what's been really cool to see is that though our tangible components of the brand, so the colors, the fonts, the logo, have changed somewhat over time, I would say that our adjectives, our brand adjectives, really haven't. They've remained consistent. And I think that is part of really building a known brand over the years, is staying consistent with those core adjectives. So for example, our core adjectives have really been focused around being down to earth is a huge one. So wanting to make sure it doesn't feel like we are, it feels very much like we are on the same playing field as all of the dietitians that we serve, and feeling like we're all part of like one community, all trying to achieve a common goal of furthering the profession. So down to earth, approachable. I think our tone has always been, we've always intended to come across relatable. And if you've checked out our Instagram profile, like we really try and include and incorporate humor and relatability into our content, but still being professional, and still being trusted. So ensuring that people know that though we have that side to us, we take our content really seriously, and we take our content process really seriously. And so that has all really remained consistent. And so no matter where you are in your business process, whether you're at the beginning, whether you are in the growth phase or the scale phase, it is important to kind of, if you've never done this exercise, it's a great idea to do it and to give yourself those adjectives that you can continue to come back to when you feel like you need to make decisions about your logo, about your colors, about your marketing messaging, about your tone. I think this is becoming particularly important in the world of ChatGPT and AI, where AI can be a really great tool. ChatGPT can be a really great tool for things like copywriting. So writing for your website, writing for your email campaigns, but ensuring that you are very clear with ChatGPT about what is your brand voice, what are your brand adjectives, so that that tone can come across in how you use messaging in your website copy, in your emails, or else it's going to sound really generic and it's going to sound really robot generated. And that's not what we want, right? We want how we're putting ourselves out there into the world to still sound very like us, even if we're using ChatGPT as a tool for efficiency and for wordsmithing and for helping us get our ideas and communicate our ideas more effectively. So that first version of Dietitian Success Center, I really just laugh when I look back at that brand. And if you go onto our Instagram at Dietitian Success Center, you can scroll back in the images or in our posts and see, like, from those very early days, just how bad the branding was, the tangible parts of the brand. Because it was just me doing it, I completely DIY'd all of it. Like, there's posts and there was content where it's literally like light green with like white font, which obviously you cannot see. And so that was really, and then the first version of the logo for Dietitian Success Center, I just did it myself on Canva. And again, I think that was maybe before Canva had their logo tools, but I also knew I didn't want to create something that was already like available on Canva. Obviously I wanted something unique. But it's so funny, actually. I remember, so my dad is actually my dad's a very creative person. He used to do a lot of graphic design back in his early career days. And I remember when I went to launch DSC, and he's like, "Krista, the logo doesn't look good." And honestly, at that point, I just had so much else to do that I didn't care. And I just used it. And honestly, that was the logo that we used for like 3 years, up until we did a rebrand last year, which I'll talk about. So like, it's okay to DIY it at the beginning. And honestly, it wasn't that bad. It was just like, from a graphic designer's perspective, or somebody from graphic design, it was not very good and it was very DIY, but oh well, that's okay. Sometimes you have to start with imperfect action if you don't have much of a budget and you don't want to spend a whole bunch of money on something. I think it always looked professional, which was really important. And I do think, especially if you are working with patients and clients, I think professionalism cannot be undervalued when it comes to creating your brand. You have to make sure that, because there is absolutely an element of like, if somebody comes to your website and it looks like a hot mess and it's just like, unorganized, they can't find the information that they need. Maybe your logo is like, totally out to lunch, not readable. that's going to communicate something about your brand, right? And you could potentially lose customers or clients that way. And so having a professional look is very important. Luckily enough, there's a ton of tools now available, like the Canva logo generation tool, like a lot of the website platforms like Wix or Squarespace, where they will guide you through that process of like choosing your brand colors and picking a template that aligns with your brand. So you don't have to be a graphic designer, you don't have to be an artist in order to make it look good. But you can still make it look good, because that is really important. So anyways, that first version of Dietitian Success Center was a bit of a hot mess. But it's fine. It did what it needed to do in those early days. So we really kept that branding and that also involved picking, I think, 3 to 5 brand colors and 1 to 2 brand fonts that we would use on our website and kind of across socials. Now again, Canva really helps with this because they have their brand kit feature where you can input your colors and your brand fonts so that you can always use the same ones when you're creating content. But if you need inspiration here, make sure and use Pinterest for sure. So what I do whenever I'm going through a brand refresh is I create a secret board on Pinterest. And so secret means that it's hidden from anyone else. So other people can't see it publicly. And if you just search like branding inspiration, or if you put your brand adjectives into the Pinterest search bar, so let's say you want like a calm, peaceful, feminine brand colors, it will give you a lot of really great ideas for colors that all belong together. So make sure and use Pinterest for font combinations, for color combinations. You can also always look externally for inspiration too. So I think a lot of times there's concern around like, oh, but I don't want it to look like I'm copying someone else's brand. And yes, of course, like I would never look at somebody's brand and say, I'm going to use these exact colors and I'm going to use these exact fonts. But you can totally look externally for inspiration. Nowadays in the online world, given how many people have online brands and businesses, is anything really novel or truly unique? Probably not. I'm sure you could find somebody out there who has the same color combinations as you, but what always makes us unique is how we pair that with things like our brand adjectives, right? So how do we show up in the world from a brand adjectives perspective? That is always going to be unique and differentiated, but then that matched with our colors, logo, etc. So for me, I remember with my first business, I was really, I loved the brand Fresh Nutrition, Fraiche. Her name is Tori Wesner, and she was a dietitian. But I followed her food blog for a really long time. And her food blog was very like bright, airy, lots of white. And I loved that look, but I also have really always loved bold colors. And so I combined the two pieces together. So I had like on my first website, it was all white background. And then I brought in pastel colors because I really love pastels and I love just colors in general. And so brought those two together in that way. So you can absolutely learn from other people and gain inspiration from other people without it being copying. And so that was kind of V1 of Dietitian Success Center. And then version 2 was actually prompted when we made the switch over to a new website platform. And so oftentimes that will be kind of an important like point where if you're going to be making a big tech change, like switching to a new website, Like I have a dietitian who I'm working with right now, and that is something that she is going through the process of doing. She had DIY'd her website before. Now she's a few years into her business, and she really feels like it's time to level up her brand and refresh her brand. And so now she's working with a company to update her website. And as part of that is being kind of re-guided through this branding process. And so this is something we did too when we switched from our website that we started with to a new website. The website designers and developers kind of had us go through that process of refreshing our brand colors, rethinking our brand fonts. And so at the time we ended up choosing more sort of bold colors. We incorporated navy blue, which we didn't have before, kept the logo the same. I think just refreshed the brand fonts. And that was all part of the that website switch. And then so that was probably, I think that was 2 to 3 years into the business. So the brand had pretty much stayed consistent for about 2 years. And then we decided to make the website switch. And then about a year later, I decided that it was time to change the terrible logo and to do a complete refresh of the brand, keeping the brand adjectives the same as I talked about before. But then we actually went through the process of hiring a branding expert to redesign our logo, to refresh our brand colors, to come up with a slide deck template for us. So, something that was very unique to us. If you've watched any of our video courses, you'll see that we have these like really cute fruit and veggie icons on all of our slides. So that was custom made for us through this brand expert, brand designer. And to come up with some graphics for us that we could, or rather some templates for us that we could use for social media. So we ended up spending about, that project was about, she was located in I can't remember where she was located, somewhere in Europe. And so it was about 1,500 euros for that whole process, for her to, just to give you a ballpark of like how much that sort of thing costs. But out of that, we got so many brand assets that we could now use moving forward. And I think that process was just a really important piece to the evolution of Dietitian Success Center and helping us look more professional and helping to ensure that when people saw the brand, they thought, oh, this is a trusted brand. This is a professional brand. So that was money that was really, really well spent. And so, then the question comes up, well, how do you know when you need to do these brand refreshes, or when do you know when the time is right? And, I think that one of the important elements to all of this is that refreshing your brand is not going to solve a sales and marketing problem. So I often hear that of like, oh, my business isn't working. I think I need to like redo my branding. And it's like, well, that's actually not the problem, probably. It may feel fun to do. I'm talking about from experience because I've totally been here, where there's this temptation to want to refresh a brand and think that like everything's going to start working because now suddenly your brand looks different. When in reality, it's probably that you don't know how to market your business, or maybe you need to work on those marketing and selling skills. And so, if that is the reason, it's important to just be critical and think, okay, is this actually, what problem am I actually solving here? Do I actually need a brand refresh, or do I just need to do more sales and marketing? Now, if your business is at a point where you feel like it is growing or it's doing well, you feel like you're meeting your goals, and you want to level up you feel like, okay, I'm ready for growth. I'm ready for the next version of myself and my business. That can be a really great point to take a look at your brand, because I think that, for me, from my experience, um, and this is sort of a mindset thing that I always love to think about and consider in business, is that, the person who you are today is not the person you need to be in order to meet your next goal, or hit the next level in your business. If you were that person right now, you would have already hit that goal. And so you have to evolve and grow into that version of yourself, whether that is somebody who is, you know, a better marketer, whether that's someone that's more confident, whether that is someone who can, speak more confidently about what they do and the value they provide. There's a necessity for growth there that has to happen, from you personally as the business owner. But then I also think from the brand too, right? There is like a transformation that the brand needs to go through in order to hit that next level in business. And so I think if you're finding yourself at a point where you feel like you're sort of status quo, maybe things aren't changing or shifting or growing in the way that you want them to, but they're working, but you just want to hit that next level, that can be a really great point to ask yourself, okay, is it time to refresh the brand? And if you've been in business for a little while, I would totally encourage you to find somebody professional that can help you with this process. It's just a really fun process. And I think, coming out of it, when you work with somebody who really understands what you want to accomplish and how you want to come across, it's so exciting to get those brand assets back from them. And I think the confidence with putting that out there into the world can be its own marketing channel, honestly. Like when you're proud of your brand and you're proud of your logo and you're proud of your graphics, you will share them more. You will talk about them more. You will put them out there on the internet because you want other people to see them. I know that's always been my experience. And so it's definitely money well spent if you have the budget for that. And how do you find someone? Really just, I found our logo and graphic and branding designer, I think that's what she's referred to, on Instagram. So I just looked for like logo design, brand design. I just looked through different people's Instagram profiles until I found somebody that I loved their style. And then I just reached out to her. That was as simple as it was. I think that's a great way to find people for websites or for logos or branding, because then you can really see their portfolios. And so would recommend going that route. But her name was Chloe from Overtone Creative, if you ever want to check her out. She does amazing brand work. And so, yeah, I think that there's some other questions that can be asked if you feel like you're in need of a brand refresh, and kind of asking yourself, why, or do I need this? Is this important? Or is this just shiny object syndrome? Is this just me kind of chasing something new instead of committing to the thing that I've already created and just working on the sales and marketing piece? But a few other elements that could prompt a brand refresh or a brand change is, has your target audience changed? Are you looking to serve a completely different audience than you were before? And maybe your old brand adjectives and brand visuals aligned very well with that old audience, but not necessarily the new one. So maybe before you were doing baby-led weaning, and so your branding was very much more soft, maybe maternal, calm, peaceful. And maybe you've made a shift into triathlon sports nutrition. And so that doesn't necessarily, those brand adjectives don't necessarily align anymore. So that can be a good time or a good prompt for a brand refresh. Have you changed? That's another really good question to reflect on. if you feel like you're in need of a brand refresh, if you are the personal brand, do you feel the same way as you did 2 years ago when you came up with your original brand and brand adjectives? Or do you feel like you have grown and evolved and changed? So for example, I don't necessarily feel like my personality or how I show up in the world aligns as much with the like white, bright elements and the pastel colors. It was very soft. It was very girly. It was very feminine. I think now I've evolved as a person to feeling more, I don't know, I think perhaps bold is one word to describe how I feel differently now. I'm unafraid to take up that space in the online world. I'm not trying to blend in with other people or other creators. I want to make sure that DSC really stands on its own and is very unique and different and looks very different than some of the conventional dietetic systems and organizations that are out there right now. And yeah, so, or do your branding elements feel out of date? So in the story of my logo, my quote unquote terrible logo, did it just feel not good anymore? And the answer to that was, yeah, it did feel not good anymore and it needed to change. So that can be a prompt too, that it might be time to do a refresh. And there really is no hard and fast rule when it comes to how often to refresh your brand or to look at your brand elements. But again, you do want to be critical of, am I doing this for the right reasons, or am I doing this because I have shiny object syndrome and I'm just looking for, I'm just afraid of committing to the thing that I've already created. And I'm afraid to do the hard work of learning how to sell and market myself. And so instead, I'm kind of skirting around that by working on the fun visual components of my brand. And so what I would recommend at any point in business, if you feel like you're looking for a series of steps to guide you through this branding process, these are really the steps we've used through the whole evolution of the brand, is number one, get clear on your target audience. That's where everything starts. It really all starts with the target audience. So if you aren't clear on that, make sure and get clear on that. Get clear on your brand adjectives. Come up with about 3 to 5. Step 3, look externally for inspiration. What are some of the brands that you resonate with and why? Create a secret Pinterest board and start pulling together that inspiration into a place where you can, use that to create your brand elements, or you can give that to a designer to create them for you. And then step 4 is either DIY it or use professional support. So professional support, find someone on Instagram, look for recommendations, and look up things like small business branding or personal branding. Those are going to be how you find those people. And make sure and use the Canva brand kit as well to just streamline your whole creative process. Okay. So any questions, please do post in the chat. If you have any questions about branding, any comments about anything that I covered, would love to hear from you in the chat. If you're not part of our free community yet, make sure and join us. Just pop on over to dietitiansuccesscenter.com and access our free starter kit, and you can come join us in the community. So with that, thank you so much for joining me for this live episode. And I think these have been scheduled out for the next little while, so you can see some of the topics that are coming up. But yes, thank you for joining me on Tuesdays, and look forward to this episode, which will be posted to all of our podcast platforms on Thursday. All right. With that, one more thing that I want to notice, or that I want to mention too, is that I have a newsletter now. I have a business-specific newsletter for registered dietitians. I call it Business for Dietitians. And I literally publish a new newsletter every Wednesday that is simply just talking about something in business that is I'm thinking about, I've had conversations about, I'm interested in, my goal is just to provide a lot of really great free advice. So there's a link to subscribe to that newsletter in the description of this podcast episode. All right. Thanks so much for your time. Have an awesome week, and I will see you next Tuesday.